Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we have our third part in our Perdition's Mouth instructional series. This is the third and final part. We will be covering combat in this video. Be sure to check out our previous two parts if you haven't seen them yet. Now, before we get into how to play Perdition's Mouth, I do want to mention our sponsor, StoneValleyGames.com. This is your friendly distant game store. They have a great thing going on over there, all kinds of great stuff. They've got card games, board games, war games, RPGs, everything you could need to scratch your tabletop itch. They will be able to help you out. Go check them out. There's a link in the description below. They have some great programs over there as well. If you are a return customer, they have a loyalty program. If you live in the continental United States, they will ship to you for free if you order $100 or more from them. And if you are in the United States military and you're stationed overseas at an AA, AE, or AP address, they'll ship to you for free as well. So be sure to go check them out. That's StoneValleyGames.com. There is a link in the description below. Now, before we get into the specifics of combat, let's take a look at line of sight. The following do not block line of sight: portcullises, dead heroes, levers, treasure chests, trapdoors, rubble, water, and uneven floors. On the other hand, the following do block line of sight: heroes, enemies, insectoid nests, victims, obstruction, concealment, which will be marked with this symbol, walls and slits, closed doors, and any square that is otherwise out of bounds. When you take the attack action on the Stone of Destiny, you can attack one enemy. In order to attack an enemy, you must be able to draw a line of sight to it. Line of sight is a straight line from the center of your hero's square to the center of your target's square. This line cannot cross a square occupied by anything that we previously mentioned blocks line of sight. Target must also be within range. Players find their range by looking at the range attribute on their current hit point line. In this case, we have a range of 1 to 2, and so this hero may attack a target from 1 to 2 squares away. Range can change based on hit points, and you can see that if this hero drops down to here, they now only have a range of 1. Range may also change based on the effects of curses, treasures, or wounds. Players should count range as the shortest distance, including diagonal squares. So this is range 2. This would also be range 2. A square diagonal to your hero or adjacent to your hero is always range 1. In this case, the hero has line of sight but does not have range since this enemy is 3 spaces away. Line of sight abilities and attacks cannot target a figure beyond range 6. This enemy is currently at range 7, and so it cannot be targeted. You may draw a line of sight through one corner of a square that blocks line of sight, such as this case, where this square blocks line of sight, but the character can draw line of sight through that corner there to this guy. However, line of sight cannot be drawn through 2 corners that block line of sight, so now there will be no line of sight on this enemy. This even counts if the 2 corners are not near each other. So in this case, this enemy still would not be within line of sight, because to draw a line, you have to go through the corner of this square and then this square as well, which means 2 squares that block line of sight have been drawn through. If a figure attacks or plays an ability through a slit, as you see here, then they play it as if it originated from the slit and draw a line of sight from there. However, range is still determined from the originating space of the hero or the character doing the attack or ability. And so in this case, this would be out of range since this hero has a range of 2 and it's 1, 2, 3. If the enemy was here, then it would be in range. To resolve an attack, follow these steps. You may play a numeric card to boost your attack attribute by the card's number. Certain special attacks will allow you to also play special numeric cards to boost. Some hero cards will add additional abilities to your attack, and other heroes can play cards to aid your attack. Next, draw a response card and add the card's number to the enemy's defense attribute. In the case of an Acolyte, that's 1. It's important to realize that once you have drawn a response card, you can no longer play additional hero cards. The attack is successful if your attack beats the target's defense with all bonuses and penalties added. So in this case, 2 plus 1 is 3, and the hero's attack is 3 plus 3 is 6, and so he does in fact succeed in attacking the enemy. If it had been a tie, it would not hit. A successful attack deals 1 damage to the target. An enemy such as the Acolyte, which has 1 health, will die from that 1 damage. For enemies such as the Guard that have more than 1 health, place an enemy damage token underneath them. The figure will die when their total damage equals their health. You can attack an insectoid nest as if it were an enemy. When a nest is killed, remove it from the map, place a rubble token in its space, and increase the threat meter by 1. Some hero cards and abilities, like Elisa's Fireball or Simma's Banish, alter an attack to hit multiple figures. There are 2 types of area effect attacks. Fireball is an area attack, while Banish is a cone attack. Both types of area effect attacks share some common rules. No matter how many enemies they hit, all attacks against these enemies resolve simultaneously. However, you will draw separate response cards for each attacked figure. If additional hero cards are played to boost the attack, each card can either boost the attack against all of the affected figures or just one of the affected figures. This will be decided by the active hero. Wounds may not be used to boost an area effect attack. This prevents you from playing negative numeric cards to weaken the attack against heroes that may be caught in the area. The area effect attack can only hit each figure in the area once, regardless of how many squares they take up. So this guy takes up 2 squares. Even if both squares are within the area, he's only getting hit once. Walls and closed doors will block area attacks. However, a closed door on a line that's between 2 squares that could be affected by the attack may actually be broken. If a treasure chest is caught within the area of effect, it can be broken as well, so be careful. If there's not a hero adjacent to a treasure chest to loot it when it's broken, then the contents inside of that chest will be lost. A closed portcullis will not block the area effect attack, but it can be hit and destroyed by one. For an area attack, choose the origin square. It may be any occupied square within range that the hero can draw line of sight to, so maybe this square will be the origin square. The origin square and all squares at range 1 that have line of sight from it are affected, so all 3 of these enemies would be hit. It's important to realize area of effect attacks can hit friendly units as well. So if this hero were here, he would also get hit by the fireball. It's also important to remember you can never target an empty square. So for instance, if this guy wasn't here and Elisa wanted to hit both of these guys, she would not be able to because she can't target this square. And instead would have to target one of these individually, and then the radius, of course, is not going to hit the other one. Now, cone attacks are a little more complex than area attacks, but I think once you understand it, it will become intuitive as well. A cone attack, such as Banish, affects a triangular area and originates from the attacker. First, choose a square adjacent to the attacker within line of sight. So, for instance, this square. The cone will be drawn in that direction away from the attacker. Cones are, of course, affected by walls, so this wall here would block the cone from spreading out in that direction. The cone is drawn as a triangle with its top in the chosen square. So this area of effect attack would initially affect this square. So following the cone's direction, for each additional range, add 1 square to each side of the triangle. So 1 would then affect these 2, and then go out to the next one, and now we're at these 3. And if this wall wasn't here, then at this point, we'd be at these 4. And of course, if this wall wasn't here, it would be spreading on that side as well. So let's move the hero here now, and you can see, and we'll just ignore the walls here for the moment, and we'll just cast this out in front of us. So first, this square would be affected, and then at range 2, these 3 squares here, and then at range 3, these squares, and then at range 4, push out again. Obviously can't go any farther here, but all the way out to here. So you can see how it really widens out pretty quickly. Cone attacks can be implemented from a slit, as we discussed earlier. And in that case, line of sight will be drawn using the same techniques that I showed you previously with the slit. It's important to realize that no matter how big the cone is, only squares within the area of effect and line of sight are affected, with a few exceptions. Closed doors will of course prevent the cone from reaching through it, but the closed door itself is affected by the attack. But concealments, treasure chests, portcullises, heroes, and enemies will not block the cone's area of effect. It will blast through all of them, hitting them as it goes. As an attack, you can attempt to break open a treasure chest, closed door, or portcullis. Chests and doors do not have a defense attribute, but when you resolve the attack, you draw 2 response cards from the deck, and your attack must beat the sum of those 2 cards. You of course can boost that attack as normal, but as normal only before you draw the response cards. When you break a treasure chest, 1 hero in range 1 of the chest may draw a treasure. And the treasure is of course removed from the map. If there is no hero in range 1, then the treasure is destroyed and removed from the map, but no treasure is drawn. When you break open a closed door, you remove it entirely from the map. It can no longer be closed. An open door cannot be attacked or damaged. Portcullises are stronger than doors. To break a closed portcullis, your attack must beat 3 response cards. An open portcullis cannot be attacked or damaged. Sometimes when playing a powerful hero card, you may gain a fatigue token. Each fatigue token you have reduces your AP attribute by 1. However, keep in mind it can never be reduced below 3. You will only lose fatigue with certain hero abilities and at the end of a scenario. Now let's discuss the spawn action. New enemies will move onto the map during a spawn action. To resolve the enemy spawn, there are 3 primary steps. Check the threat meter, pick monsters in the spawn pools, and then choose spawn points and place the enemies. The threat meter can be anywhere from 1 all the way up to 5. The very first space actually is this red star. During the primary spawn action, the heroes will pick any figure in the primary pool. During the secondary spawn action, heroes will pick any figure in the secondary pool. The number of chosen figures will be equal to the current threat. If the number happens to be larger than the number of enemies available in the pool, then simply choose as many enemies in that pool as possible. Finally, move the chosen enemies onto the map. Insectoids will spawn at insectoid nests. Cultists will spawn at trapdoors. Enemies will always spawn adjacent to their spawn point. If there are multiple spawn points, players will choose which spawn point, and they also choose which adjacent square to use. If there are no empty squares adjacent to a spawn point, then place the enemy in an empty square diagonal to the spawn point. And if you cannot spawn a cultist adjacent or diagonal to a trapdoor, then place the cultist on the trapdoor itself. And if a figure cannot be spawned within one range of a spawn point at all, then it remains in the spawn pool. And if possible, you must pick a different enemy to move onto the map. It's important to realize that lesser insectoids cannot stand in the way of a Chylene. When you pick a Chylene from the spawn pool, you must place it before placing any other enemies. And if there are no empty squares in range 1 of the insectoid nest, then push 1 or 2 smaller insectoids 1 square away from the nest to make space for Chylene. During an enemy move action, each enemy on the map will move toward the heroes. This is referred to as the enemy target. Each enemy considers only its own position and does not account for the blocking of other enemies. The players are encouraged to use this to the hero's advantage. Each enemy gains AP equal to its move attribute. So for instance, we have a guard here with 3 movement, but they're going to stay at range 3. And we have this bone worm with 1 movement. Enemies spend 1 action point to move to an adjacent square, and enemies cannot move diagonally. As usual, all figures and walls will block movement. Also remember that enemies do not suffer the threatened square movement penalty. Also, insectoids and the demon will ignore terrain movement penalties. It will always cost them just 1 AP to enter a square. Also, enemies will never suffer failure events when intentionally moving into special terrain. But if they're pushed into special terrain, they will suffer failure events. Cultists will manipulate objects such as opening doors to reach their target. They will spend the same amount of action points as heroes, but they open a locked door for 1 action point and unlock it. Depending on the scenario, enemies may relock it after passing through for 1 action point. When enemies move, they will move to the best spot for an attack, and they will move in the following order. Insectoids move first, followed by cultist, followed by the demon. Within an enemy type, they will move from smallest to largest, or from the top of this sheet to the bottom. The same goes for the cultist. If there are multiple enemies of the same type and size, prioritize the enemy closest to a hero. So in this case, this bone worm. If an enemy is closest to multiple heroes, prioritize the hero with the least health. If there's still a tie, then the players get to choose. Spend each enemy's action points to move towards the targeted hero. They will always use the shortest path to reach the hero. And enemies determine which hero is the closest by which one they can reach, spending the fewest action points. An enemy will always stop moving once it reaches a square where it can attack a hero. Enemies have perfect information of the hero's positions, including knowing the distance to heroes behind doors and walls. Also, just keep in mind, in any situation where it's unclear where an enemy would move, the players choose the enemy's movement. Enemies with ranged attacks prefer to attack from the farthest range possible. Guards, for instance, have range 3 attacks, so they will move to a square at range 3, if possible. If the guard cannot reach any square at range 3, then it will try to move to range 2, and so on. Summoners teleport when they move. As a result, these enemies have unique priorities of movement. If a summoner has line of sight to any hero, it does not move. Before moving, a summoner chooses the weakest hero on the map and then teleports to a square that has line of sight within range of that hero, while staying as far away from the hero as possible. When doing this, they will also maximize their distance from other heroes as well, again while maintaining line of sight and range on their targeted hero. Acolytes do not move toward the heroes. Instead, they move toward the alarm symbol on the map. When an acolyte reaches the alarm symbol, it sounds the alarm and then escapes. The acolyte is then placed in the reserve pool, and the threat meter is increased by 1. However, even though the acolytes are constantly running for the exit, if they happen to be within range of a hero during their attack action, they will attack the hero. Chylene, Tharnix, and the demon are all considered large enemies because they take up more than 1 square. However, despite this, large enemies can squeeze to move through crowds and tight spaces. You may begin an enemy's movement from any of its squares and then treat the enemy as though it only occupies 1 square as it moves. So even though there's no way for this Tharnix to actually stand here in this area, it still can move through it when it's moving. However, it must end its movement in an area where it can stand on empty spaces for its entire base. Chylene and the demon can shove minions aside to make room for themselves in a crowded space. While moving, these large enemies may move into any smaller enemy space, trading spaces with it. This costs the same action points as moving into an unoccupied square. However, enemies with this trample ability cannot trample past other enemies with the trample ability. Because of this ability, trampling enemies may ignore small enemy figures when choosing priorities to the closest hero. It's important to note, though, that trampling does not count as pushing and will not trigger terrain failure events if the enemy is pushed into special terrain. The Tharnix emits strong pheromones that enhance the senses of other insectoids. Each other insectoid within 1 to 2 range of the Tharnix gains attack +1. These pheromones actually inform the Tharnix's movement as well, as when it moves, it will not try to gain line of sight to a hero, and instead put itself in a position so it can provide as many bonuses to other insectoids as possible. It's also important to note that the Tharnix does not need line of sight to the insectoids to provide this bonus. Also, the pheromone bonus from multiple Tharnix does stack. During an enemy attack action, each enemy on the map will attack a hero. Just like with movement, enemies attack in the following order: insectoids, cultists, and then demon. And within those groups, the smallest to largest attack. And then closest to farthest away from a hero. Then, out of the targetable heroes, the enemy will choose the weakest hero. If there's a tie, then the defending hero out of the tied heroes. If both are defending, then the Magus hero. And if there's still a tie, then the players choose. If enemies of the same type are the same distance from a hero, then the players choose which enemy attacks first. Be sure to fully resolve each enemy's attack before making the next attack. Resolve enemy attacks as you would a hero's attack. You may play numeric cards to boost the hero's defense. Draw a response card and add it to the enemy's attack. If the target is defending, draw another response card and add it to its defense. And then the enemy's attack must beat the target's defense with all bonuses and penalties added. As usual, once a response card has been drawn, no more hero cards may be played. When an attack successfully hits you, you lose 1 hit point. Then place the top card of the wound deck on top of your hero deck. Guards and the demon all have a poisonous attack. This gives fatigue to any hero hit by the attack. After the Chilene or the demon resolve an attack, they immediately make a second attack against the same target, and you're reminded of that here and here. This is a completely separate attack. Cards and abilities played for the first attack do not affect the second attack. New response cards are drawn. If the enemy kills a target with the first attack, then it will choose a new target if possible for the second attack. When a hero's hit point meter reaches the bottom space, the hero dies. The hero's peg is removed from the Stone of Destiny at the end of the hero phase. The threat meter is reduced by 1. The hero figure is laid down on their square. Allies can loot items from the corpse at range 1 for 1 action point per item. Also, corpses are considered valid targets for spells. The hero's body will be removed from the map when any figure moves into its space. There is no additional action point cost for moving into a dead hero's square. After removing the body, the dead hero cannot be looted or resurrected anymore. Also, if the hero had been killed by an infestation, they cannot be looted or resurrected at all, and their corpse is removed from the board immediately. When a hero dies, the other players have 3 options. They can restart the scenario, they can continue the scenario. If they do this, then the dead hero is dead for the rest of the campaign. Or they can use a resurrection treasure, such as the Resurrection Chrysalis. And that's how you play Perdition's Mouth Abyssal Rift Revised Edition. My 3-part series should teach you everything you need to know, so be sure to check out parts 1 and 2. I have a great time making these videos, but if you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is check the description or leave a super thanks in the comment section below. All of that is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching this. Be sure to check out our other upcoming videos. Aeon Trespass Odyssey Instructional Series has begun. Part 2 will be coming out soon. Frosthaven Part 2B will be coming out soon. And How to Play Australia. I'll begin scripting that probably in the next day or so, and how to play 1815 Scum of the Earth. All of that's coming up very soon, and until next time, if you're bored online, board offline.